Good morning, everybody. I'm Adrienne Martinez Hollingsworth. I am a candidate for a director spot for NAHN at the national level. I'm currently a part of NAHN. And I wanted to do this brief video before we segue into my Q&A, which should be happening in about 15 minutes. So we may have people signing on, but I wanted to give you a little bit of my background and talk a little bit about my platform and how I arrived here. So I'm going to share my screen with you. We're going to go through some slides really quickly. So again, this is me. I'm Adrienne Martinez. I am currently a postdoctoral research fellow, although I'm in my second year, so I'm going to be taking a faculty position starting in August. I'm currently at UCLA in the National Clinician Scholars Program, and I'm also sponsored and I partner with CDU in the Urban Health Institute. So you may have seen this on the invitations for this talk and actually in other talks I've done, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions about who nurses are and what we do. And I think, we have the media to blame for that, but we also have certain communities where we've been underrepresented, including in Hispanic, Latinx communities. And we don't really know what being a nurse means. But this is what it means for me. And I think this really kind of drives my entire platform and my way of viewing the field, which is that a nurse is many things. But fundamentally, they're a person who's committed to helping people live their best lives, which means not my best version of your life, but your best version. And that may be different than what society expects out of you. It may even be different than what your family or your partners want you to experience, but this is your health and your experience. And I think it's important for us to really allow individuals their own perspective. And that means it's important for us to know where they come from, who they are, because that really informs their identity and how they experience health. So going from Adrienne to Dr. Martinez, I think it's important to map out my path, because another big thing to me in this space is making sure that we're including people at all levels of nursing. We talk about there being a nursing ladder, and that means we welcome people to start in one place and end up at another place, and it's generally a terminal degree. The reason that's problematic is because, let's be real, there are a lot of resources and support required to achieve a terminal degree. Not everybody has access to that, and traditionally, our socioeconomic status really has a big role in that experience, and for Latinos especially, right? But also, I think it's flawed logic to believe that when people stop at a certain place on the ladder, it's because they just haven't mustered the resources to move forward. In reality, many people enjoy very much where they are and what they're doing, and we need to support them wherever it is that they've kind of decided to stop that progression, because sometimes along the ladder, any of these spaces can be an end, and there's nothing wrong with that. So I really want to be more inclusive to nurses wherever they are, without this pressure of you need to attain a certain thing or what you're doing isn't good enough. And I think the reason that I have this perspective is because, I'm like Adrienne from Highland Park, and now I'm Adrienne with a PhD and a postdoc. And having gone through these experiences have really influenced how I'm a nurse and how I mentor others. So it's true, I called Highland Park home for a long time as a child. My parents were divorced, so I actually lived in different places, and this is where my father lives. And it was in the 90s, so I'm giving away my age, but it was pretty rough at the time. And I remember there being a lot of violence and a lot of uncertainty, but I also remember there being wonderful experiences and warmth from this fantastic community, right? I did a bio major at UCLA, went in with a 3.7 and, first gen and that whole experience. And I did terribly, right? I got there, didn't have the support I needed, didn't understand even how to study, because some of the schools I came up through didn't really need to teach me. And I didn't know the whole academic, all the different little strategies that you need to learn, didn't really have any mentorship. And at the same time, my father had his first below the knee amputation. And at that point, my grades just plummeted at UCLA. So I was there kind of without a whole lot of meaning for a while, and I ended up leaving, had a baby, and got married in that order, and was basically working as a hospital aide in a mental hospital. I was doing groups with severely mentally ill individuals and kind of everything that goes along with that. And I was on Medi-Cal at the time. There was even a point where I was laid off and didn't have any insurance. And so going from somebody who didn't have a whole lot and whose family has kind of grown up with socioeconomic challenges in predominantly Latino neighborhoods in Southern California, and kind of going through the academic system and realizing that there's potential for other things that I didn't know were there, and then all of a sudden losing it was really challenging. And it was only the nurses in my life that started kind of giving me opportunities, making suggestions. Nurses that I never would have known because we didn't really have much contact with the healthcare system as a kid. Nobody in my family was in nursing or medicine. But working as an aide, having all these nurses tell me in a hospital setting, hey, start going back. There's a program at the UCLA Occupational Center. You can get your LVN, just start that track. Start going back to community colleges, kind of build yourself back up into being the candidate that you were before all of this life happened, which I think a lot of people, that's what happens in our community. Life happens. And so I did that, went through ELA, OCC, and then also ELAC, and also, LA Mission College, and all these different community colleges to cobble together the ability to finish at UCLA, to get back into UCLA and finish. And at that point, I started, hearing from nurses in my community that I should also think about next steps. You're already an LVN, you love it, think about doing the RN. And so I found a clinical nurse leader track at Charles Drew University, which is an entry-level master's. And having already had the LVN and some floor experience and working, primarily in safety net settings, FQHCs and things like that, it was a natural fit for me. And I really loved what they were doing at CDU in terms of health disparities research. Finally, there were words for things that I had experienced growing up that made sense to me, especially in terms of diabetes, because almost everyone, including me, in my family has diabetes. And there is a genetic component, of course, but there is also a socioeconomic and access component that exists there. And I think it's important for us to kind of tease that out when we talk about health disparities, especially about chronic illness. So at CDU, I got invited to be part of a Bridges to the Doctorate program for the PhD at UCLA, finish the PhD with tons of support because there are so few Latinos in this space. It's not that I'm exceptional. I mean, it is. I'm exceptional in that I'm the exception. There's so few Latinos who make it through this educational meat grinder. And it's really unfortunate because we desperately need people with these perspectives. Because as I move forward in my career, and as a director in NAHN, hopefully, I don't forget these aspects of my life. The being the kid in Highland Park and remembering how dangerous it was and thinking about education as a way out, but also thinking about how isolating it was to be that kid in a space where there wasn't a lot of that really being supported. I remember my dad getting really, really subpar care at most of the places he went. And I don't want to single out county, that's not fair, but county has fantastic resources, but they're overburdened. And the assumption that my dad didn't speak English, which happened constantly, was really hard. It was really challenging. And the fact that they didn't know anything about who he was as a Mexican-American male and how that influenced his treatment adherence mattered. Being pregnant and having a baby on Medi-Cal and going through that whole process, I will never forget these experiences. They make me who I am, and they make me better equipped to advocate for these individuals at the national level, because there are certain decisions that are made in large organizations like NAHN that are made at the top with this sense of not entitlement, right, but just kind of a lack of awareness of what are we talking about when we talk about the entire career ladder. And this is it, right? This is the career ladder. We go, well, there's kind of the pre-diploma people, and then the diplomas go all the way up to the doctorate, and there's all different variations, and there's different money associated with every level. And I just want to call your attention to this idea that if we invite people to a national meeting and we charge $500 for admission, it's affecting the doctorate people who are making about that salary different than it's affecting the diploma people, right? And you can see the finances here influence decision making, and I don't want that. That's why we don't have enough people representing these lower levels in terms of education, not in terms of anything else, certainly not always in terms of clinical background. I know a lot of nurses who have doctorates who spent very little time actually directly with the community. And this also comprises the majority of representation that we have as Latinos in this space, right? And so we really need to leverage the knowledge and experience of that tier and stop acting like it's an afterthought, and I really want to advocate for that at the national level. So we know that there's this critical nursing shortage here in California, and this is true, all over the United States. But we do have one of the highest deficits here locally. And we have 3 times the deficit compared to the next level of state in terms of shortage, which is Texas. And so we had originally anticipated that our need for RNs was going to grow by 12% over the next 10 years compared to 7% across all other industries. But this data was from 2018. We had no idea there was a global pandemic coming. We had no idea that people were going to be stressed. So our projected 1 million job openings that we needed filled by next year has seriously been exceeded. And we think about the predicted number of nurses who say they're going to leave their current position or the field altogether when the pandemic resolves. It's close to 80% in recent national surveys. So again, we know we need more nurses in California. This is true across the nation. And we know that what was a problem is now a gigantic problem. And why is it important for us to specifically get people onto the nursing ladder that are Latino and kind of continue to push them up? And again, this is very California centric. I apologize. But it's the data that I'm most familiar with, and I like to present on things I feel pretty solid about. But if you look at our demographics for the most recent window available, we're almost 50% of the state, the Hispanic Latino population, and we're certainly a minority majority state. And this is 2015, right? Reported in 2016. So we know that it's even more so now. But if you look at the racial composition of nurses, it really doesn't balance out. It gives you this clear idea that if you go to a hospital or even a community clinic and you're seeking care as a Latino, you're more likely than not to be not represented or not culturally congruous with the people that are there to serve you. We also know that your perspective matters, right? There are social determinants of health that influence who you are and really give you the ability to understand other people's perspectives, to really get what they're going through, what their situation is, and to be able to influence how the treatment plan is designed around them and with their support, right? And nobody knows this the way people that come from these neighborhoods know it. They know it deeply and instinctively, and they can point out flaws that maybe are being overlooked. And that's why I think it's really important as a director at NAHN that my role be a gut check. That's what I said in one of my last talks. I should be a gut check for these conversations. I should be asking, I'm happy to support, the leadership of the president and others, but in reality, are we excluding anybody with this current approach? I think that is the most important question that any of us can ask ourselves, which is, are we making sure that all of these experiences are well represented and supported? And so that's the guy right there. That's my dad, John Martinez. His birthday was a couple days ago. However, he has passed away. It's now been about 5 years. And what a fantastic guy. He was a great dad, very supportive, but his diabetes took him piece by piece. He was on dialysis for 18 years. And I got to say, his experiences navigating community health as a person of color, as a person who is largely marginalized because he also had, disabilities that prevented him using a lot of services. The assumption that he spoke Spanish, he was illiterate, so we did have that challenge as well. I carry my dad's perspective with me when I go into these environments, even though I'm now Dr. Adrienne, right? I'm like Adrienne who's done a postdoc and Adrienne who's done all of these other things. Like, it doesn't matter. What matters is that I remember who I am, where I'm from, and who I'm from, right? And I'm there to make sure that this aspect of what we need in nursing is discussed at the national level where the power is, right? Because NAHN is a powerhouse, has the potential to greatly, vastly influence public policy and health policy in the United States, especially as we move out of the pandemic. And I want to make sure that holding hands, we all go together, as opposed to just kind of, elites and privileged in our environment kind of moving forward. We appreciate them. They certainly, do their best to represent us, but we need to make sure that that representation is broad, diverse, and really as heterogeneous as our Latinx population, which is very, very diverse. So I would like to thank everyone. Thank you for listening to this talk. I'm going to just stay on in case we get some sign-ons for questions and answers. I'd love to thank NAHN because they were my gateway into the NAHN system, and I've gotten a lot of support there. Also, of course, UCLA and CDU because they really support this interest. And again, the UCLA CDU bridges to the doctorate because I wouldn't be here. A lot of us wouldn't be here as people of color without the overt recognition that we're dealing with not only racism and, gender bias and heteronormative things that kind of challenge us, but there's also some strong classist issues that are impacting our community. So I just want to make sure that that comes to the forefront. So I'm going to stop sharing now. And I see we have someone who signed on. Hi there, Lizett.
Hi.
So what I was doing was just kind of going through a simple slideshow and talking to people about like who I am and where I'm from. And then I wanted to leave it open for some questions and take some time, see if anybody signs on.
Okay, sounds good. I couldn't log in through my laptop, so I log in through my phone. And it's the same features, I'm sure, but I can't really see like my camera or whatever, but that's okay.
Well, you look lovely, especially for a Saturday morning. I was like, man, this is early to ask people to come on. But, like most of us, so many of the people that I've met through NAHN have these larger family responsibilities. It's like you're a nurse, but you're also a parent, but you're also like often in the military or you're working full time. You're doing like all of these things. So I thought Saturday might be the least intrusive time.
Yeah, I know. I thought it was perfect 9 o'clock because I agree, especially nowadays, people are getting out on their weekends and stuff. So no, 9 o'clock was perfect.
Cool. I was going to say, I just did a good 12, 15-minute intro on my background, but I know you're also running for director. What I was going to be doing is any other people that pop up or questions, we'll answer them for the next 15 minutes. But if you would like to do an intro and kind of talk at all about what you're interested in as a director, feel free.
Okay. So I can't see how many participants are on the call, or I guess.
Right now, yeah, and I was going to say right now it's just us.
Okay.
And we just started 3 minutes ago. I reposted the link, but I suspect, for a lot of people, it'll be easier to watch the video after the fact. Mm-hmm. And so, I don't know. It doesn't sound like you'll be able to share anything because of your computer difficulties. Mine too. Mine got stuck in a loop this morning, like a reboot loop. And I was like, what? But we're okay now. So if you'd like, I could just ask you a couple questions. Would that be easier?
That'd be great. Yeah.
Okay, great. Can you tell me a little bit about your personal experience on the nursing ladder, like where you started, where you are now in terms of your career, and how that will influence how you are a director at NAHN?
Perfect. Yeah. So I started actually as a CNA in a nursing home. I literally just right after high school, I decided to pursue nursing and found a program with the Regional Occupational Center. And later on, just decided to go back to school. I got my LVN license. And then I went back to school to get my prerequisites for my RN license. So as you know, when you have an LVN license, you do like a bridge program when you become an RN, but you still have to get all your prerequisites done in your general ed, just like everyone else. So I did that. And when I got my RN license, I was already working as an LVN in the nursing home. I just started taking more responsibilities as an RN, which later on evolved into a supervisor position. So when I got when I was getting close to finishing my bachelor's degree, I ended up going back to school. And this one, I did it online. I got offered the position as director of nursing, which is a role in the nursing home world. Is very well known that you basically oversee all the nursing services for the nursing home, and you're in charge of all the surveys that are, very intense for nursing homes, staffing and all your policy and procedures, and, naturally all the care planning involved for the seniors or residents. And, during that role, I really evolved as a leader. I joined different professional organizations, within my field of long-term care, which one of them is Leading Age. It's a nonprofit that connects senior communities in the nonprofit world. I joined a leadership fellowship. That leadership fellowship took me to a lot of different parts of leadership. We really did do a lot of, we did more like advocacy and policy as well, but a lot of it was focused on culture change, strategic planning, policy and procedures, and a lot of emotional wellness for staff. Long-term care has been, one of the areas that maybe not a lot of medical professionals, focus on, but it has a lot of longevity with staff and with residents, with patients. So we went to all over the country. We went to like 5 different states all over, just for a variety, to get to know the culture of long-term care from small towns to big towns. And we ended up in DC doing some older American policy. And that was a big learning experience, because you really get to see, how much influence you have as a nurse, and you really do have a voice of just explaining, sharing, and I believe that sharing is a big part of who you are, and not a lot of people are comfortable with sharing. And, I've been very intentional about sharing more of what I do and more of me this year. And which is really why I decided to run for this elected position. I felt that it was the appropriate time to share. I also graduated with my master's degree. I should add that to the mix. So I started pursuing, I decided to pursue higher education. So I thought, going in the route of nurse practitioner, would give me more clinical experience with geriatric, which is really my field of passion. And I feel like it did. I joined the MSN program at Cal State Long Beach. And, one of the reasons why I decided to pursue higher education, it was going through the overall fellowship, if you want to call it that, with your program. And, and I felt like getting exposed to research, getting exposed to, having a voice in the community, being involved at large, really inspired me to pursue higher education. And I felt like it was the right timing. And, and I thank you for that, because if it wasn't for your inspiration and you're just instilling that passion in education, I probably would have gone a different route with the master's. And I'm glad that I stayed in the nursing world, because again, it really equipped me to have a bigger voice in long-term care and senior world. So here I am. I'm running for elected office. Of course, I have my vision. My goals are to really focus on engagement, reliability, and mentorship, advocacy. And I feel like my leadership role, management role has really prepared me to be reliable, to really, put things in place, and, the basics, follow up and hearing what the members have to say, and gearing things, to overall meet their goals being a member. I've been a member since 2013, and I've had my good and bad, but most of like my good, has really propelled me to pursue higher and better things. And that's really what I chose to focus on. So I'm taking those seeds that were planted by you and other members to really evolve and flourish, and, and really share. And be a voice for the members like me that, perhaps are in the entry level, but still considering, higher roles, higher education, trying to just navigate the way through, how do you continue working as a nurse, but also, share your passion, be a voice to what you believe in, and be listened to. So, I hope through mentorship, I can accomplish that. And I know that NAHN has engagement strategies, and I really hope to take the ropes on that and drive some good changes, and and take the people along that want to participate, because I think that's important as well. Opening the forum, opening the committees to the members at large.
Yeah, there's so much good information in that. I think that you are somebody who is just widely known. You're pretty well known throughout all of the NAHN circles and other circles that we've been in, but you're generally known as being, like a competent and kind person. You're very professional and you're able to work at these higher levels. But I would never have known had you not told me where you came from. And I think that's the crux of why we need people like you in leadership. This idea that when you've navigated the field from the very start and you understand the challenges that are unique at each level, you're just better able to advocate for like a much broader perspective on what the role means. And yeah, like you, I care a lot about people who are just getting on the ladder. And actually, a lot of my some of the things that Lizett was talking about, which I know I didn't mention in my talk, but I started this group called Theory Generator Playground, which is basically just I was very lonely as a PhD student. There were like not a lot of people of color. There were no Latinos. There were no tenure track faculty. It was just really challenging. And so I created this research group where we started kind of working together and doing small projects to give us access to research, which allows you to get into schools, right? Like if you don't have research in your background, it's incredibly competitive and it's certainly very hard to get funding. So that's kind of what Lizett was talking about. But there is this idea that once you start winning, you can kind of keep winning. You end up being the one that gets invited to things. You get invited to apply for certain things, including scholarships that kind of build, and you end up being part of this elite group of nurses that has this background. You're no longer being served for dinner. You're at the table because it's a consequence of all of these years of work. But that's just such a small percent of us. When we think about the number of Latino nurses in the country, there's so many who aren't even a nurse by traditional definition. They are the CNAs, the HHAs, the people who are really doing the work and have licensure, but it's not through the boards of registered nursing. And so we don't count them necessarily. But I do think that it's so important for people like me and Lizett to be able to speak to that experience because we really need that voice. It really needs to be there. And so yeah, I was trying to think of a couple of the other things that you said. One thing that was interesting to me was that I went to an occupational center. I went to East LA Occupational to get my LVN. And what I remember that was kind of crazy was there were 600 applicants for 60 spots. And this was in, I want to say 2006. It was like a while ago, before nursing was recognized as this like really, well paid and, it's always been respected, but it was a little different back then. It certainly wasn't, LVNs weren't seen as being like highly paid. And so I remember I had just like essentially failed out of UCLA. I had just had a baby and I was kind of like aimless, but the nurses at my work were like, Adrienne, you should go try to do this. When I showed up with all of the training and preparation of somebody who'd gone through major academic training. And I was being put up against the other girls in my neighborhood in East LA. And like, that's not fair. It's not. It's just that there was so much competition even then to get into an associate's program at one of the community colleges that even that felt overwhelming. And so instead, what we got at our occupational centers, which is funny, where I live now, I can like basically see mine right over the hill. It's fundamentally unfair to have programs at occupational centers that are designed to be for everyone, but really are still taking kind of the elite trained people who have access. So that's how it was at mine. I'm wondering if that's how it was at yours. And I'm kind of wondering why we don't have more of a focus on these. I wonder how many of us who are now at graduate level nursing started off in these little places. So yeah, any thoughts on occupational centers?
Honestly, I love occupational centers. I have a long history with, I went to SCROG. That's how probably people my age know SCROG. It's in Torrance. It's now called so-called ROC, Occupational Centers. So it's in Torrance. I started there at 14 years old.
Wow.
I had a long history with them. So I was introduced to that occupational center through my mom, who was considered low income, and low income children can go through this grant and work during the summertime for extra income. So I started working in the summers through this occupational center at the YMCA. And I did that for a few years. So naturally, I got involved with their admissions coordinator and the person in charge of this grant. I mean, now I know all this information. At that time, we just got a letter in the mail and just kind of offered a summer program, a paid summer program for 14 and older children that were in the low-income family. So that's, the name of the basics of the program. So since I started there in the summer, when I went back to school in the fall, I realized that I can take elective classes there that would count towards my high school credits. So I started taking evening classes from data entry, medical terminology, I mean, very basic classes. So by the time I turned 18, I was done with high school, and the next class that you had to be 18 and older to take was the CNA class. So I just called the admissions coordinator, and because I had that history, it was just, somewhat of a transition class for me. I didn't have to go through a lot of the rigorous, waiting list and interviewing with the admissions coordinator or anything. But yes, those programs are funded, by the state, and because of the very, limited funding they have for each class, because they offer a variety of entry-level technician training, a lot of stuff. So they for example, they offer the medical assistant program, the phlebotomy, which I also took, an EKG class, and the CNA class. So in high school, when I was taking one of those classes, I believe it was like medical terminology and hospital occupations basics, there was a 50-hour internship, 50-hour clinical that you have to do. And I ended up doing that at Little Company of Mary Hospital in Torrance, in emergency room. And honestly, it was through the work of God that I ended up there, because I had no idea what nurses did. I don't have a nurse in my family. In fact, I'm the first family member who had graduated high school and college. And obviously now the first who's graduated with a master's degree, but besides the point. Anyway, so.
It's an important point though, but yeah, go on.
So, I ended up there in emergency room, and, that's really when I recognized I was just very, very active, very, in a way of, I don't want to say like, oh, I was very hyper or anything, but I was a very hard worker. So when I got to the emergency room, the nurses, I was volunteering in the fast track unit, which was kind of like a triage, minor stuff unit. And, they started like using me to transfer things, kind of like, take this there. But then they realized that they can use me to like stock things, because I can see the difference between the dressings and the needles or whatever. And they started taking me to other parts of the ER where the nurses noticed me. And that's really how it all started. That's really like the point of change, if you want to call it that. One of the nurses, I still remember her name, Dion. I told her I was going to be going every Tuesday for, 4 or 5 hours. And, she happened to work in every Tuesday, and she just kind of adopted me. And, I was basically her assistant. She would tell me, we're going to do a Foley catheter. I knew what to get. I was 17. I knew what to get. We would get, we had one trauma room. We would get like one trauma room, and she knew like, you got to stand in that corner and don't say anything, just observe and stay quiet. So I got to see a lot of things in that little corner. And, so yes, and I'm still connected to SCROG, to so-called ROC. In fact, a couple years ago, so I'm connected because I go every year and basically give an overall, open the forum to anyone who wants to be a nurse. I go over, what it entails, what it involves, my journey. I share my journey. I stay connected with some of the students, if they have questions, if they go on to a community college or a four-year college, how do they get into a program, their classes. And a couple years ago, I was their shining star of the year. So that was interesting. And and it's just a good relationship. Their superintendent's still there. the couple of the professors are still there, so it's nice to go back and reminisce, how the journey started and how they've helped me and how we've stayed in contact. So that's my long story about ROC.
I love that. I mean, and it's amazing how just a couple of individuals can change your entire life course, and how many times nurses who are just willing to talk to other people who are some other place in their life, we're able to bring them in and kind of show them all of the stuff we can do, show them this potential future, which for a lot of us really gave us the way to have the lives that we have now that we possibly could never have envisioned without this, right?
Oh, absolutely. Like I always say, I might not be able to change the world, but I can change someone's world. Someone changed my world. And I know it could happen because it happened to me. Someone who I wish I was connected to her, but she took 5 hours out of her week to just tap into my future, to my passion, to really guide me. And I was open to the opportunities. So I think, that also has to be, something that people understand, especially with this membership. You have ADN students that, are entry level, that are, ready to take the next step, either to a BSN program, to an MSN program. And you'll be surprised, not a lot of people want to go the traditional MSN program for nurse practitioner. A lot of nurses want to pursue public health. They want to pursue leadership. They want to pursue education. They want to pursue, clinical specialists. So, all these different rounds, they're all great. We just have to, be open. We have to have the resources, and we have to kind of create the pathway to have their goals aligned and help them get through that, next step. Because sometimes the bigger step is to make the decision. I think that takes the most energy, is making the decision. And it can take people, 2, 3, 5 years to make a decision to go back to school for various reasons. So if we can, create pathways for them to maybe make their decisions sooner, maybe feel more supportive to make those decisions, I think NAHN will go a long way.
I agree. I think that, I'm a big stages of change person, and there's that big pre-contemplative area that we got to kind of get through, right? And there's backsliding. I think it's important to recognize, and I always say this when I'm giving talks for high school kids especially, any way that you can work as a human, you can do that same job as a nurse, and not only make more, but have more of an awareness of the impact on humans. You want to be an engineer, you want to be an informaticist, you want to be like literally anything that you can think of, and I've worked with tech companies, I've worked at like hospital settings, like there's so much flexibility that it's really worth thinking about it if you are inside an advocate and you've got that like ganas, right? Because this is not easy work, no matter what role you take on. So it's super important for us to be supportive of each other. I think we're getting near time, so I'm going to say my last little comment, and then I would love it if you have anything that you want to sum up. I think when people think of me as a director for NAHN, what I want them to think of is me being that gut check, that taking that 1 second before we all agree to kind of a consensus decision that considers who isn't in the room, who isn't being advocated for, and is this a good decision given the diversity of who could be a part of NAHN. And I think that in a lot of organizations that I've been a part of, decisions trickle from the top down. And whether or not decisions for the group are reasonable, appropriate, affordable, acceptable, right, feasible, are really built into the upper layers of the organization. And I think it's important, especially financially, that the decisions that we make as a group are inclusive. And I think that, I'm going to throw something out there that's a little bit controversial, but I do want to make a point here, which is there are many conferences that happened during the pandemic that still charged close to full price. And there was a movement during the pandemic, and actually kind of pre-pandemic, of people of color saying, if your academic conference costs $400, it's not inclusive, right? There has to be a space for people who aren't making middle class money to have their voices heard in these decisions where, you know, thoughts are being generated that drive our field. And I want to think about that when we think about how NAHN disseminates information, how we have regional conferences and a national conference. Are we making sure that people are invited? And so I right now am the co-chair of the Western Institute of Nursing Latino Special Interest Group, which doesn't have a lot of responsibility other than we kind of help formulate and support the people who are creating the symposium idea that represents Latinos at the Big Win Conference, right? That's our main thing. But when I took over this role, my main perspective was, how come there's no CNAs at these conferences? Like, these are huge conferences and there's so little representation of Latinos, and it's because everybody here is bachelor's level and above because it's so darn expensive to come. And that's not okay, right? And so that, you know, that role, which has given me some insight, it's not very time consuming, but it's allowed me to see this gap. And I really want to bring this knowledge, this gut check to NAHN and say, yes, there are 4 million nurses in the country. Yes, 7% of them, at least in California, are Latino, you know, and that doesn't represent the 17% of us nationally. But even so, is that number right? Are there people like me and Lizett that are in training at an occupational center that aren't being counted and therefore not included? And we can be better. So that's it. I'm Adrienne Martinez. I'm running for a director spot at NAHN. I would love your support. And however this works out, I will still be here supporting the directors-elect and also the president, because I really believe in what NAHN is trying to do. And now, Lizett, any final comments?
Well, first, I want to say thank you for allowing me to come to your forum, you know, and share a little bit about myself for a lot. You know, it's been really, this journey has actually really been really nice. You know, I know our election starts on Monday, but I feel like I've already won. You know, I feel like it's really, you know, taken me out of my comfort zone to share more, to be more intentional. I hope that we all get, you know, through the election, you know, nice and smooth. You know, I wish the best of luck to you. My best wishes to you. And it doesn't matter the outcome. I feel more connected. I want to continue creating the community with you and supporting the new board. You know, personally, I know that, you know, my position at NAHN is going to be more focused on engagement, advocacy, you know, along the same lines, you know, like you feel we need a seat, we need a voice for the underrepresented, the unlicensed, you know, personnel that is aspiring to become nurses. You know, I agree with that. You know, aspiring nurses deserve a seat. They deserve a community. You know, those are the ones that need our community. And I know that will happen, you know, especially under your leadership. You know, I know you will. I know that you will create those pathways and you will create the tension that's needed to look at that and create a voice for them. So my best wishes to you.
Thank you. You too. And, you know, best of luck to all the candidates. As long as we have people that are representing us, we're so excited for this whole process. And yeah, we appreciate the opportunity from NAHN. So we'll check in. Oh, it looks like Sonia just signed in. I was about to sign off, but let's hang out for just a second to see if Sonia has anything that she'd like to add.
Good morning. Sorry, I'm at work, but I just wanted to drop in and say hello. And again, thank you for stepping up and wanting to volunteer at a higher level. Being in the executive board and at national is completely different than anything else. And so I really do appreciate the people that are stepping up and wanting to serve and volunteer more. So congratulations, Adrienne. I look forward to, you know, what's coming up next and the future. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for signing in. We're going to have this video available for anybody who, you know, I know lots of people are working and have family responsibilities. Yeah. Best of luck to you as well. I think it's marvelous that you've dedicated so much of your life to this organization, and that you've chosen to kind of move up to that next level. And yeah, no, we're definitely happy to see you out there and hear all of your positions on things.
Yep. Thank you. You guys have a wonderful rest of the day.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for coming.